Morning! Here we are. We're back. Nerd Rage online, MTGO, first event of the year. Thanks for joining us bright and early for some of us, me included. And we're going to be here with you today playing Modern all day long. We're excited. We're looking forward to it. The format is somewhat different if you've been sleeping under a rock or had no electricity for the last week. The format is different than it used to be, so we should see some interesting stuff play out today. We're playing for 2,000 in cash prizes today. We're expecting 7 rounds plus a top 8, and we've got 2 guest commentators joining me today. Let's go ahead and bring in our first half of the day commentator, Becky Bell. And there she is.
Hi, how's it going?
All right. Well, I'm doing great, and I hope you are too. I caught a little bit of the VML on Friday evening. Looks like you guys are doing good there.
Doing good. We're just getting into our top 24. We're going to be doing wild cards next week and then the top 8 after that. So it's the perfect week. If you haven't really been watching, you're going to be coming in at the penultimate spot if you want to come check us out on Fridays at 6 p.m.
Which is, slower than he would like, but he's not under. Would we even call this any pressure? I mean, it's some, I guess.
I would not. And I would definitely say better late than never. The Stoneblade deck doesn't really have a ton of ways to disassemble your Tron in the main deck. This Teferi Time Raveler, not really going to matter for Tron. So much of what you do, especially main board, is just at sorcery speed anyway. So Teferi, not the biggest threat in the world. This Path of Exile, not going to be the biggest ordeal either, I don't think. So looking at what is in the hand for Samuel right now, I think that Matt is in a pretty good spot, still has 3 cards in hand, and based on how this is kind of played out, hopefully there are at least 2 threats in there.
Yeah, so as far as Samuel's concerned here, we're kind of naked unless there's a Worm Coil engine. So if there's Worm Coil, we got multiple ways to deal with it. If it's anything else, good luck.
Yeah, I think if we're Matt, well, I guess if you're Matt, you know what's in your hand. But if we're looking at Matt as Tron players, we're hoping that it's some kind of big Planeswalker threat. This Teferi is just going to go ahead and come down, probably, do some card drawing, try to anticipate what Matt is going to play on the next turn. Sadly, does not find any kind of counter magic. But is holding up the Path to Exile, so if the threat does end up being a Worm Coil engine, there's at least some assurance in this Path to Exile.
Yeah, I definitely like the drawing off of the Teferi, as several of the plays that Matt could have, Oblivion Stone, Ugin, will wipe the Teferi out anyway, so building up loyalty for the future is not going to do much good. Now, 5-card Tron hand. Oh, well, okay. I was going to say, sometimes you're keeping just mana and just hoping to draw stuff. There is an Oblivion Stone.
Mm-hmm. Not the worst thing to have in the world.
Right. And this will... honestly, we're at a point where if you're Matt Dunkin looking at this board, do you even need to use the Oblivion Stone?
No, I don't. I wait.
Yeah, and here comes an Expedition map.
And on the other end, if you're Samuel... you look at what's in your hand and you don't have anything. You don't want to commit to the board with an Oblivion Stone in play, and this Path to Exile isn't doing anything. So at this point, if you're Samuel, I feel like you're also kind of sweating.
Right. So we're just going to be attacking for 1, and probably Matt is going to be taking it. And then the next turn, we may see another attack for 1 and another take of it, because there's just no... and we're basically stalled out, and that greatly favors the Tron deck, especially in Game 1. Like you were saying, the inability for the Stoneforge deck. Now, we didn't get a chance to look at the Stoneforge of the deck list, the player's deck list yet. We'll do that after this game. But this is an open deck list event. So Matt Dunkin, you know what? Matt Dunkin doesn't care what's in Samuel's deck, because Ulamog's going to come down, wipe out some of the resources, and not end the game, because there are Path to Exiles to remove it. But certainly provide a setback, as Oblivion Stone can wipe out the permanents, Ulamog takes a couple land, and Samuel is diminished on resources. I suppose of all the Ulamogs that ever cast, this one is not tremendously impactful.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I got really excited when we tapped for 10 mana. Tapping 10 mana for Ulamog, one of my favorite things in the entire world.
Ooh, you're not going to like my Neutron deck then.
Oh no! I cut Ulamog for you once. I'm willing to do it again. This does seem like it is one of the more underwhelming Ulamogs that have ever been cast. Though I've cast some pretty sad ones as well. So it could be better, could be worse. At least we have this Oblivion Stone to make sure that our opponent can continue to not commit to the board, and we can just keep searching for another threat in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. Now, with the Stoneforge Mystic in hand alongside the Maul of the Skycleaves, Samuel may need to commit one piece of equipment to the board just to force the Oblivion Stone, and then be able to play the second one later and hope. I mean, Matt Dunkin is looking strong to take down his first game of the tournament, but you never know. There are certainly Tron sometimes can flood out dramatically in late game as a lot of the deck is devoted to assembling the mana base. But Samuel, as the player's pace of the game slows down here. Not sure what exactly is the issue, or maybe Samuel's just trying to decide which path to exile to use. But the sideboard games, when we get to them, as we have a moment here, we'll just discuss it. The sideboard games for Tron against Jeskai, any bluish control deck tend to get harder because of the variety of land destruction or land inhibiting effects. And honestly, Becky, those aren't very fun to play against as a Tron player.
They really aren't. Most of the time, they're kind of just like a little bit of a stumbling block, especially, again, with the inclusion of Veil of Summer. Like, we get to really efficiently and easily handle a lot of the counter spells. So most of the time, the land destruction is just delaying the inevitable of me still land destroying and exiling with all of my different colorless threats. But it is certainly not fun, and every once in a while it does allow these sort of Stoneblade decks to really pull something out. We are going to have a nice situation here where we did destroy both of the white sources. However, this Scalding Tarn's likely just going to fetch up Samuel another one. Yep, there is the Jeskai Triome.
Yeah, cool additions to a lot of these 3-color decks in Modern are just a single Triome, so that on a turn where your fetch land does not need to produce mana immediately, you can just fetch a land that taps for all 3 of your colors for the rest of the game. And here is a Stoneforge Mystic, and so we are going to tutor up the Batterskull.
Batterskull is kind of an interesting choice here.
Okay, I guess, why do you think that? I don't disagree with you, but why is that?
I just feel like at the situation that the game is at now, if you commit to the board anymore, you're going to be running into just this Oblivion Stone. And so maybe getting a sword will get you a little bit more card advantage than the Batterskull is going to. And so that might have been what I would have picked, but perhaps Samuel has played this matchup a little bit more than us and knows what he likes in this position.
Yeah, and now with a stream of lightning bolts, if the Organist is able to attack and flashback lightning bolts, that's a indirect damage source that can add up fairly quickly. The Oblivion Stone can prevent that if it wants to, and it looks like it is going to crank off here on Matt's main phase. Okay.
Do you think that means that we have a 7-mana Haymaker?
Well, we have a main deck Thragtusk. Matt Dunkin, wise player. Not necessarily for this matchup, but as we can see here, Path to Exile Lightning Bolt, not very effective against Thragtusk.
How about 2 Lightning Bolts?
Yeah, how about this burn plan being kind of destroyed by the existence of the free life gain? So this is going to be... Samuel has got a lot of work to do. Matt only has 2 cards in hand. Samuel, I think, can assume that there's not a Planeswalker in hand, as it probably would have come down, or at least a Karn, as it would have come down in place of the Thragtusk. But Matt looks like he may be proving me wrong immediately.
Sometimes you draw it.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah, maybe we just want... Oh, nope, there is a Karn in
there it is. Karn with Sanctum. Maybe he was just wanting to get the Sanctum of Ugin down first.
Yeah.
So Sanctum of Ugin, a land that triggers whenever you cast your big stuff, and it searches up more big stuff. So
Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, rightfully going into hand.
Yeah. So that's this was not looking good for Samuel, and now it's looking worse. Although you can't be, I mean, can we really be more dead? We were already dead. So really the game state didn't change.
No, not too terribly. I mean, we called it a few turns back that Matt Dunkin was in a solid position to win the game, and it would kind of take the rug being pulled out from under him for Samuel to take this game over. And it kind of even gets more and more solidified the moment your opponent plays a Karn, and instead of thinking that anything is a threat worth -3 to exile with, you just say, I'll just take an unknown card out of your hand. That matters more to me than anything that you have on the field.
Mm-hmm. So Path to Exile takes out the Thragtusk, or at least the front half of the Thragtusk, as it's sort of a split card, as the token is now in. And there's a spell clear, and we see, and this is kind of game one, there's a lot of removal in the Jeskai Stoneforge deck, which is just not really what you're looking to draw. And Samuel Graebner has drawn a lot of it. I believe we had 2 paths and now 2 bolts, and well,
they're just not very efficient against Tron.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was just trying to say, well, we'd rather draw this card, but I don't know if that card's in our main deck. Whatever this card might be, but it's rough going here. Maul's Kaikleus comes in on top of the Dreadhorde Arcanist, so this is going to be able to attack and actually flashback a larger spell than normal if there is one, because the Arcanist is at 3 power instead of 1. But it looks like we're just going to not even bother pathing the token to give another land. Instead, we're just going to get in for our damage. And Matt Dunkin could probably win this game without playing another card.
I am kind of in the same boat as you. So we had Thragtusk on the board, so now everyone has had a moment to read Thragtusk if for some reason you don't know what Thragtusk does as a Modern player. For those of you who maybe don't play Modern, now you got to see it. I want to circle back to why it is such a good card in the main board now, when it typically has been pretty much all sideboard for the longest time. If you want to go ahead with a little bit of, because you also even said you were like, smart man, has Thragtusk in the main board.
Yeah, I do like Thragtusk. Yeah, it's it's redundant. It's good against the aggro decks, which the Tron deck struggles with in game, well, all the time, but especially in game one. And yeah, it's you're able to cast it when your mana is disrupted, which is nice. Although that element is not relevant here. As Ulamog number 2 comes down, wipes out the non-blue sources, and now Samuel is going to pack it in for game 1. So let's go ahead. Now we have a moment, look at the players' actual deck lists, as we see Samuel sideboarding there. Samuel Graebner, Jeskai Stoneblade. We saw some of the main deck cards we did not see show up in game 1. Looks like we pretty much saw everything. Spell Pierce we didn't see, and that actually would have been nice.
Yeah, that could have been a little bit of a helper, but everything else we pretty much did see. It is interesting to see that it is a sort of feast and famine and not a sort of fire and ice, which is what I feel like we usually see in the Stoneblade decks, but we don't even have any in the sideboard, so I'm a little surprised to see that card omitted, but could be just a metagame call from Samuel saying that I think that this card is better against the more mass of the field. But that does kind of surprise me, considering at the start of a new format, you typically see a lot of aggressive decks, and the main color of aggression is red. So maybe your game plan against the red decks is just so different that you're not even worrying about ever having a sword, but it is still interesting to me to see that card is not in this list at all.
So, sideboard cards relevant in the matchup. 2 Cleansing Wildfire. There are a few other things that could matter. Wear and Tear might take out something, especially going first. Mystical Dispute's an extra counter. Surgical combined with Cleansing Wildfire is strong, but with only 2 of each, that's going to be rough. This is not a great sideboard for Tron. Let's go ahead and look at the Tron deck. And here we see, again, lands, not a great number of them. 20 cards devoted to assembling the lands. And then, wow, 3 Thragtusks main deck.
Oh, okay. I'm actually a big fan of that.
A lot.
Right now.
And
I think it's a lot, but I think it's a good position to be in.
So this is a 4 Karn build as opposed to an 8 Karn build, which is why there's room for additional cards.
Choosing to play creatures over the artifact sideboard.
So you can see some of the cards in the sideboard. Honestly, this is not a sideboard as we move down into game 2. This is not a matchup, I meant to say, where Tron is not sideboarding to beat Jeskai Stoneblade's main deck. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to. Tron is
Nope.
sideboarding to beat Jeskai Stoneblade's sideboard,
Mm-hmm.
which in this case is not actually doable because normally you'd be, okay, do they have Fulminator Mage? Do they have Damping Sphere? Those are cards that Tron can answer from the sideboard. Those cards are not present. There's Cleansing Wildfire,
Oh,
which
thank goodness.
Tron can't actually do anything about. So really, Matt Duncan could, if he wanted to, almost present the same 60
Mm-hmm.
and just hope that Cleansing Wildfires aren't drawn because there's not really other cards that matter.
And
now,
even then, only one Cleansing Wildfire, not that big of a deal.
Yeah, right. It's something that you can easily recover from. So no sideboard cards in this hand, but Samuel Graebner with a absolute ton of ability to dig through the deck, and there we find one. Okay. So one Cleansing Wildfire will be a hiccup in Matt Duncan's development. Matt Duncan kept 7 cards this game.
Mm-hmm.
That is bad news for Mr. Graebner.
Yeah. If you know your opponent is playing Tron, especially like even in just like a mirror and your opponent is seen playing it, are you scared? I'm usually like a little scared. And I'm like,
no,
you've got a lot of gas, you've got all your lands, okay.
Yeah, if your Tron opponent keeps 7 and they're going first, I mean, you have to rethink things if you don't have a turn 2 kill. If you're playing, lands, much less Jeskai Stoneforge, neither of which have turn 2 kills, so you're just in trouble. But we see a forest played on turn 2.
I don't know if I would have kept a 7 if there was a forest on turn 2 personally, but
this suggests to me, well, a couple things. If I was watching a player that was new to playing the deck, I would say, okay, they don't realize quite how important it is to have Tron right away, but they have a hand of good payoffs or good protection. The alternative, and probably the case here, is again that Matt Duncan's, this is a sideboard game, he wants to be redundant, and his hand is so strong as far as defending against what he thinks Samuel might have that he thinks, I don't even need to have immediate Tron because I can hold you off anyway. That is not good news for Mr. Graebner either.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder how much of this potentially could be Matt Duncan putting emphasis on, Relic of Progenitus is good against this matchup, so I want to keep this hand because there's a Relic of Progenitus in it. Sure, I'm going to dirtle for a little while, but Relic of Progenitus is really going to help me put a chokehold on my opponent, so I want to keep the hand based on this card alone.
Right. The reason that's so significant is because, for viewers that didn't quite pick up on what Becky was saying there, is the only land hate are the Cleansing Wildfires, but Samuel's deck with Snapcaster Mage or a pumped Dreadhorde Arcanist is able to recast the Wildfires. So the Relic prevents that and allows them only to be cast one time, which, like we see here, there is a Wildfire in hand, but if it's just a one-shot Wildfire, Matt Duncan will probably shrug that off.
Yeah, especially with the 2 mana, this Expedition Map cracking. Considering how slow the lands have been and the decision-making time that Matt Duncan has taken, I feel like his hand is straight gas.
Yeah.
And we're simply just trying to assemble our lands so that we can play some big haymakers based on how he's been playing. And it'll be interesting to see how Samuel approaches these next few turns.
Now, this is a pretty slick turn here. The Arcanist isn't going to have anything to do, but Sword of Feast Famine on the Arcanist is going to swing in, force a discard, untap the lands, and then, real quick, are we casting Seer Visions and Wildfire or Jace?
I think the play next turn likely is just going to be, Cleansing Wildfire and then hope to recast it next turn as well with the pumped Dreadhorde Arcanist, which is the thing that I was afraid of. So now I imagine this Relic of Progenitus is going to have to pop, make sure that isn't the case, and we don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, so this Relic is going to play a role here, a significant one, as it will cut off a Wildfire. But Matt Duncan now, because there was a forest played naturally, that's a setback of a turn. Now the Wildfire sets back another turn. Jeskai Stoneblade's is not a fast deck, but a two turn kind of bonus is significant. And Now, maybe there's a window here for Samuel to push this to a third game.
Yeah, this is starting to feel a little bit dirtily. And this is, we both kind of like mentioned on turn 2 when there was a forest, a little bit rough of a situation. Not what we would typically like to see, but there was possibly a reason for it. And now we're kind of highlighting the problem with that style of keep and kind of pace of play for this deck.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and nothing feels worse than cracking an egg and not doing anything with the floating mana and just like kind of laying it all on the table. Like, I have no other way to find my other land. I was kind of just searching.
Okay, here. So we're untapping on Samuel's side, and we're going to have 2 shot. Wow, there's the other wildfire. So there was. What is happening? This. I have to question this.
Go for it. Question away.
We just attacked with a Sword of Feast and Famine that is extremely likely to connect and did not spend 4 mana on a Jace
the vibes
combat.
Mm-hmm.
This is
interesting.
Questionable. I will say. Okay, we are spending that. We're playing. Okay, we're gonna run out Spell Queller as a creature, so we're gonna get the body on the board. That's fine. But
it does seem a little spookier to commit. Maybe it's. I'm trying to see if there's a reason why I would want to commit more creatures as opposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Veil of Summer being cast as just a
cantrip.
Draw spell, yeah.
Yeah. And then now we can play the Wildfire, but the Jace remains in the hand. So this could be the case where, I mean, okay, and it's enough. And Matt Dunkin concedes, and we go to game 3. Now, just to complete that, this could be a case where Samuel had a plan in mind, and then clicked through to attackers because he got too eager or too excited or just, misclicked into his attack step before he meant to, and then casting the Spell Queller was better than nothing at that point.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense.
That's possible. It could have been that was the plan, and he prioritized having the flyer on the board as opposed to a Jace. That's understandable. It wouldn't have been my choice, but okay, that could have been just clocking. I mean, is relevant. Either way, we're going to game 3 with the Tron deck on the play this game. Tron lost the game on a 7-card hand. That is not something every day, but there was disruption. Samuel drew both of his Cleansing Wildfires, and that was enough. Now this game we see from Samuel, there is a Seachrome coasting it off to try and hit the second land. Is that
again? We're on the draw,
right? And with the Wildfire in hand and a Force, I think it's justified to keep. And Matt Dunkin, I believe we're on a multi-4.
Okay, so yeah, I guess I would snap off the Force of Negation on the Expedition map too if my opponent was on a multi-4. Right. I was going to be like, this seems like a little bit interesting, but nah, it makes a lot of sense if your opponent is on a multi-4. Just straight up say, I don't want you to find the land, you better have it, otherwise I'm going to make it really difficult for you to find it. And Spell Pierce is also going to be extremely backbreaking for what's likely in the hand of this Tron deck.
Right. So if their follow-up here is a map or a chromat, really anything. I think the Spell Pierce fires off on any card. Okay.
All right.
The clock begins. So the Samuel with another Force drawn now. We are really prioritizing damage, as opposed. So okay, if this is the play here, which is fair, as opposed to waiting to potentially draw a land, then it may be that the plan last turn was to try and get the clock in. As we see that consistently here, also sacrificing potential long-term advantage for damage.
And it's fine because we found the Flooded Strand anyway.
Right. So here we are. We have our red mana. We have our Cleansing Wildfire. We're going to gift Matt Dunkin a forest. That's nice of us. He's a monocolor deck. We're giving him green. We're so generous.
True. So nice. Not what I'm sure Matt Dunkin wants to see, but kind of nice.
Well, he's our opponent. Why would we do what he wants to see?
Of course, you're right.
So, we're speaking a lot from the Tron side here, but we are watching from Daniel Graebner's perspective here at NRG game. We do force perspective from one player's side. Feeling is that it increases tension in matches if you don't have an omnipresent view, and also it allows you to take the role. We're in this case watching and able to make decisions as if we were Samuel Graebner.
Mm-hmm.
Here is the Sylvan Scrying, eats the Spell Pierce. Spell Queller is ready for the next cantrip effect, and this could get away. Oh wow.
No.
Another.
This is like basically worst case scenario if you're the Tron player. What's in the hand for Samuel is just like everything that you did not want to have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. I would have Spell Quellered that chromatic there, but this is fine. And we made black mana on the...
So I imagine the Dismember is in.
Right, and there is a Dismember. And Spell Queller is going to grab that up. Okay, well that works. And there is a 4th land. It comes into play tapped, but the clock is real. 3 swings will end the game. And Matt Dunkin doesn't have a lot to work with. Teferi coming down. Okay, pluses. I like that. It looked like the initial thought was to minus, but there with the Wildfire in the graveyard, I do like the ability to bounce the Snapcaster Mage.
That was a very interesting and hasty. Tapped a land, then played the Mine, and then played the Chromatic Star, which is an interesting way to sequence. Probably just a little frustrated, and rightfully so. Losing to a Cleansing Wildfire, not so fun for the Tron player.
Not quite giving himself the best chance there at the end with the sequencing, but in all likelihood it was over anyway. So Samuel Graebner takes down Tron with Jeskai Stoneforge to win the first match and the first round of the day. So thank you for joining us. We'll be here all day long. We were going through at the beginning of the round, if you were here, we kicked off, Becky and I were talking about some deck lists that we thought were distinctive or cool in the first deck dump post-banning kind of format reset. We're going to go ahead and continue that now. So let's go ahead and bring up the first one or the next one as we had. So mono white weenie, and the reason why, this is kind of a deck, these Martyr Sands, like we used way back in the day. If you're super old like me, we saw like Martyr Proclamation. But here we're on, we have Martyrs, we have Sarah's Ascendants, and here we have a new card, Righteous Valkyrie, which is from Kaldheim. It's a 3-mana 2/4. Perhaps we can put it on the screen. So it is on the screen already, but we can have a bigger version of it popped up in the corner. It is a 2/4 flyer. Okay, we're not able to do that with this screen on, but you can. It's a 2/4 flyer from Kaldheim. You gain life whenever you have an angel or a cleric come into play,
and equal to their toughness.
Right, and there is other life gain in this deck, like the Martyr Sands. And then whenever you have 27 or more life, all your creatures get +2/+2. That's significant because they're, for one thing, a lot of these creatures are small, but any creatures +2/+2, that's massive.
Yeah, that's a lot. And I got to play this Righteous Valkyrie in a Kaldheim draft with the there's an artifact that makes changelings. So I just got to make a bunch of quote-unquote angels or clerics with this Righteous Valkyrie. It's a sick card. And a 3-mana 2/4 flyer is not really a body to snuff at. And with these additional wordings on it, I think that this card is extremely strong, and it fits really nicely into this deck.
Yeah, so this deck is really a lot. It's another, this deck isn't going to lose to burn very often. But it's just another card that if you're not getting burnt out, you can take advantage of your bonus life and pressure the opponent. So cool build there. Interesting to see how it plays out. When we went over the first couple deck lists, that was on the first attempt at the broadcast today, which failed. So we're going to restart the list, as this was actually the third of the decks, I believe. So let's go back to the first one if we can. The Omnath Bring to Light Valky deck, which is taking kind of replacing the idea of cascading into Valky with Bring to Light into Valky, which still functions, as well as kind of just a smorgasbord of other stuff. There's Permission, but there's Omnath, there's Renatith, there's Teferi. All of those existed in a deck together before, but now we get this Bring to Light package, and on top of that, we have kind of a one-shot kill option built into the deck.
Yeah. You know, Bring to Light Scapeshift was a thing for a little while before, and it's kind of just a little combo that slid into this deck as well. So it's quite an interesting deck, and it's cool to see. Omnath was really hated in Standard because it was just such a powerful card, but maybe it'll find its place and be the correct power level in Modern. So it's cool to see that card doing some really powerful things, and putting it with a card like Bring to Light just kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, we saw, and I played a lot with the version of this deck that had the Time Warps in the previous set, and so we had, Yellie's Planeswalkers out, and then Time Warp a few times and win. In this case, we have Yellie's Planeswalkers out, get to the late game, Bring to Light, kill you. We don't need to waste our time with Time Warping and more Planeswalker activations. You're just done when the Scapeshift goes off. So cool build there. We'll see if we have any copies of that in the field today and see how that plays out. Next up, we had a Smallpox deck, which so Becky and I kind of both keyed in on the fact that there were two different, if you're unaware of how the Magic Online deck dumps function, it's done automatically, and an algorithm goes through all the available undefeated decks and picks them if they are distinct enough from each other by, I think it's 10 unique cards from the next closest deck. There were two Smallpox decks that qualified, which means they're not significantly overlapping from each other. This one is kind of more of a controlling chip damage version, like you were pointing out, and then the other version is more, would we say, aggressive?
I would just call it 8-rack.
Sure.
I mean, I think that 8-rack kind of falls under the umbrella of Smallpox style decks, but the other one was actually playing all of the 8-rack cards. So I that's where I would kind of throw it in. But 8-rack does come off as a more aggressive, not with creatures being aggressive kind of strategy, but certainly less slow burning control, which this version certainly is. And I actually like this one a lot more. I love the inclusion of the Planeswalkers and just the more. This feels like it has the potential to be a lot more consistent than the 8-rack deck.
Right. Okay, so there's a couple matches still playing in round one. So let's go ahead and bring up the Toski Stoneforge deck. So this is a Bant Snow deck with Toski, Bearer of Secrets. If you weren't around, or if we weren't broadcasting, apparently, when we talked about this earlier today, this is a Bant Stoneforge deck with Toski, which is a new card from Kaldheim. 4 abilities. The most, I was going to say the most important of which, but I don't even know if that's true.
I think all the wordings on Toski are important. He's got one important wording for each mana cost, and then it's a 1/1.
Yeah.
But this deck, so it's just really beautiful. The Bant Snow deck we were mentioning before is very. It's been a thing in the format for a while, and then Toski is just a fun, quote unquote fun. I don't know. Maybe if I had to play against this, I would not call it fun, but it's a good way for you to just get some extra card advantage out of the creatures that you're playing. And a lot of your creatures already have pretty great card advantage. Stoneforge Mystic gets you another card. Spell Queller takes a card away from somebody else. Icewind Quaddle typically is going to draw you a card. And then Teferi Time Raveler, some On Thin Ice to do a little bit of controlling of your opponent's creatures, and then some removal spell or some counter spells to make sure that your opponents don't commit anything else to the board while you're attacking in with your small creatures.
Yeah, I like how I feel like these decks, they used to have, it was mostly past the exile, and then maybe there was some On Thin Ice in the sideboard. Here it's reversed, and I think that just makes sense.
Yeah, I think
that's just kind of, and there's no reason to give our opponents free lands if we don't have to. So that's good. And then another deck that we had is the Omnath Super Friends that we both picked out. So if we have that one, and here it is. So we have Omnath, we have Ren 6, we have Teferi. All those were present in the Bring to Light deck. However, these decks are significantly different from each other. This is a lot more burn. And then we have a package that is not often seen, but
not in a long time, it feels like.
Right, yeah.
But Nihiria and Emrakul, I want to say best friends. In the lore, they are not best friends. But in a lot of decks, but maybe we don't see too often anymore. They are best friends. So the combo of Nahiri and Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn, to just have a really big turn that just kind of obliterates your opponent's board.
Yeah, super cool. And we also see a copy of Cosima, God of the Voyage from Kaldheim in here, tossed in as kind of turbocharged compared to the limited experience because of fetch lands. So be interested to see how that plays out. So sounds like all the matches are in for the round. If we come on back to the booth,